Hello, my friends. This is part two in a two-part series on an event that got a lot of public attention, where actor Will Smith at an award ceremony, Oscar award ceremony in March of 2022, he went up and he slapped the MC, who was comedian Chris Rock. Sort of stunned and shocked people. People were discussing it. And in part one, I showed the astrology, which is 11 vibration, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, also Pluto a little bit. That is it. Now, the interpretation. Let's think, what would you do if Will Smith was your client and you wanted to discuss, what do you do about this? What's the dynamic? What's the meaning? Let's dig in deep to this interpretation, because this is where the real work is done. We see what's going on. We got the data. What exactly do we tell the client? Well, here are some things. And I'm going to talk about some assumptions about how life works and some understanding in addition to the astrology, because when we're consulting the client, all of these things need to be taken into account. Number one, keep in mind that people's brains are wired in very different ways. A good thing to experience this, to learn more about this and to feel this, are YouTube videos by neurologist Robert Sapolsky, Professor Robert Sapolsky. You can just go to YouTube and type in his name. You can see how it's spelled, Sopolsky. Some of his videos on neurobiology, they're fascinating. And one of the things that he emphasizes is that there is a chemistry behind the behavior. We're accustomed, even in the 21st century, to blaming people, to wondering why they're doing this. There are reasons. There are physiological, chemical reasons. And when you look at how the brain is operating for different people, it's very different. Very, very different. So, you do not have the biological wiring. You do not have the cosmic wiring. So in vibrational astrology, it's another dimension, another level, another part of our wiring that's intimately interconnected. The way our physiology works is interconnected with our part in the cosmos. So you can look at it from a biological perspective. You can look at it from the vibrational astrology perspective. You're going to see things that are very, very different in people's charts. And this is one of the problems with normal astrology, is that the language of a lot of forms of astrology, you just have 12 signs, 12 houses, you have dignities. You don't easily see in many of these forms of astrology, especially if they're done at a very basic level, how extreme things can get, how unique and different every person is, and how in these vibrations things can pile up to an extreme that creates things that we really can't relate to. We're wired differently from these people. So Sapolsky talks a lot about how we blame and have guilt, and what we really need to think about is just how we can function better given the circumstances. Okay, so because there's a lot of judgment, a lot of decisions, like everything's like a sporting event, like a football game. Who's the bad guy? Oh, well, Will Smith is just like a crazy, toxic, macho energy, toxic masculinity, and Chris Rock was okay. Well, that might be true, but as astrologers, that's not where our attention should be. As astrologers and therapists and counselors and guides, our goal is to just understand what the energy flow is, what the dynamic is, and how to improve people's attunement to it. And don't think so much about judgment, who's right and who's wrong, and what's acceptable and unacceptable. Let's just think about what the dynamic is. What is the dynamic of Saturn-Uranus, this huge Saturn-Uranus energy? Well, I've got some ideas that are a little bit new on this, or some new perspectives on Saturn-Uranus. I've always said for many years that Saturn-Uranus is like you want to be really free. And as I've been analyzing cases of extreme Saturn-Uranus, such as this one, it's becoming clearer that another way to think of Saturn-Uranus, that yes, it's true, a person wants to be really free. And also, here's another way to think of it. What Saturn-Uranus has to do with, any Saturn-Uranus combination, because that's the strongest impact here. What does it really mean? We know that people get into accidents, they get, they get inharmonious, they get erratic. Why? What's the dynamic? Well, what's going on is that the rules, the social foundations and systems in place, what are those rules? What are the rules? What are the social foundations? What are the systems that we have in life, in our personal lives, and in the context of how life and society is set up? How are they set up to help me and you be free, to be fully alive and responsive? So to be totally Uranian, to be totally in the moment, totally free, totally spontaneous, the best way to bring that out, the full Uranian power, to be totally responsive and alive and unrepressed, is not to remove all rules. There's like an irony to this. That chaos and anarchy are not always or hardly ever the best way to liberate Uranian spontaneity. Here's an image, a jazz musician. Jazz musician is improvising, creating things in the moment. How does the jazz musician do it? First, that musician has mastered the musical instrument. It's difficult to improvise if you don't know where the notes are, if you can't move between them quickly. The jazz musician is working with scales. They're aware, either intuitively or technically. They understand all these different kinds of minor scales and major scales. Chord progressions are a big deal. Are you using, a major 7, a minor, an augmented this? What chords? What's going on here? You added a 9 to this. And so what's the chord progression? What are the harmonies? What is the rhythm? So within the rhythm, within the chord progression, within the scales, within the themes, within the concepts, the musician is set free. The musician needs that structure, that concept, those models to work from. It does not happen out of chaos and anarchy. So often the musicians gets excited about a particular chord progression, a particular melody line. He goes, oh man, it's liberating when you can find the right form. So Saturn-Uranus means I want to find that form. I want to find that chord progression. I want to find that melody line. I want to find that beat that just sets me free. It's like a song comes on, you hear it, maybe you're walking through a town or a city and you hear music and it just kind of sparks you. That's the Saturn-Uranus, that rhythm. It's not just Uranus, it's that melody line, that structure set you free. And you can look at it in so many ways. You can think of an athlete. When an athlete does a fantastic performance, better than they could do in practice, it's often because you could say the adrenaline, the magic of the moment, you're in the zone, boom, you're liberated. But it was all that practice and the rules of the game that set the framework. You need a framework. Saturn-Uranus means let's find a great framework so we can cut free. The better the framework, the freer we are. So freedom does not happen. The ultimate freedom and spontaneity and liberation and unrestrained and unrepressed beingness is not facilitated best by no structure, by anarchy and chaos. Let's find the chord progression, the rhythm, the game. Is it basketball? Is it baseball? That's going to make me free. So that's what Saturn-Uranus is about. When Will Smith is having this huge Saturn transit, like out of the norm, and specifically an 11 vibration. 11 vibration is restless, impatient, it can't wait. Any configuration of planets with Uranus and 11 vibration is the most volatile. He's all of a sudden, here's what's happening. On that evening of the Oscar Awards, what's taking over Will Smith, not consciously, he's not thinking about it. It's a mood, it's an attitude that goes right into your cellular being. You're not even conscious of these transits. They're just flowing through you. He's starting to feel like, why am I here? What is the purpose of this? Is this how we're free? And the MC, Chris Rock, is a poster child. He's like an embodiment, an archetype of Uranus. He is very wild, very free, very loose. And is that the way we want to do it? Are we encouraging and helping everyone? Have we set the right rules, structures, and systems to be really free? We are freer today than ever. We have a greater appreciation of both genders. There's less patriarchy than has been in some recent history, less racial profiling. So there's been progress. Hollywood takes pride in making some progress for liberating people. But are we doing it really the best way? How can it keep changing? What is this based on? And what's happening that night is that Will Smith is suddenly feeling he wants to change the rules. He's not happy with the rules. And something needs to be different. And he's undergoing a lot of his own stress and change with rules. He has an unusual, progressive, you could call it, marriage where there's been relationships, extramarital relationships, more open type relationship than usual, experimenting with new structures that are less inhibiting. Are these new structures any better? What's going on here? And a big question is, are these off-color jokes that Chris Rock, he's got these off-color jokes one after another, attacking every part of our personal lives, especially sexuality and racial things. He's like dropping bombs to liberate us. Very Uranian. Let's liberate us. Talk about these things. Face them. When you face them, it's kind of funny and a lot of, you might say, bravery in not ignoring things, but at the same time, always running the risk of insulting someone, of being disparaging to them, of not respecting them, of pointing out sensitive issues that need healing and not being treated so superficially. This is the risk that's being run. That night, what I'm saying is that night, all of a sudden, to an extreme level, Will Smith is feeling like, I don't know if I like all these rules. In fact, I need to find a way that works best. And when it crosses a line and Chris Rock targets something that now it's clear to Will Smith that this is not the way things should work. We should not be hitting on things that people are struggling with and need assistance with and have compassion with and making light jokes about them. There's like a lack of a sense of the sacred, of honor and respect and a real dignity. It's offensive. It's crossed a line. But it's crossed a line to him that night because it's so elevated in his being at that moment with the impatience of the 11 vibration. And he explodes. That's what happened. So in the astrology, you can see exactly what is going on. Now, taking this a step further, looking at this bottom paragraph, Will Smith has bought into the Hollywood system. He's bought into the Oscar Awards. and the rules of the game. Right after this little explosive event, he receives an Oscar award. He's very touched. He's very emotional. He's in it. He is on the team. It's like being a baseball player and you play left field or you play second base. You're on the team. You accepted the rules. 3 strikes, you're out, etc. He's in that game. He accepts it. He's a leader in it. He's engaged in it. He's honored to receive the award. He believes in it. No game is going to be perfect. There's always going to be things that go wrong. But once you buy into the game, then you have to work within those rules. And if you want to change them, you need to change them gradually. So let me read this last paragraph. Will Smith bought into the Hollywood system, the Oscar awards, and the rules of that game, so to speak. We could call everything a game. I don't mean that in a light sense, but there's like rules and of our activities. All activities can be seen as games with rules. Chris Rock's very Uranian, iconoclastic, brazen, freewheeling, raw honesty that can border on disrespect and insults is not completely comfortable for Will Smith. He finds it offensive when it targets people he loves in parts of their lives that they struggle in and where they need healing and support. That's what happened. So it is almost as if Will Smith is saying that if it's okay for Chris Rock to be brazen and to express himself without reserve, then I can do it too. I can be brazen. I can be outlandish. I can express myself. I don't have to hold back. And he gets up and he slaps Chris Rock. That could be a kind of subconscious logic. Is that logic good? No. That logic is childish. Once you enter into the game, you must play by the rules of the game. And the rules of the game are not always fair. So it might be considered to be fair that Chris Rock, as the MC and a comedian, can say these off-color, hurtful, disparaging, and disrespectful things from your point of view. But it's part of the game. It's part of the rule book. It's considered to be fair game. It's not considered to be fair for you to get up and slap him. A lot of the rules of the game are not all written in a rule book. You're supposed to understand them by participating in it. Every activity has rules. You might say, well, it's unfair that the MC gets to do this as a comedian and other people can't. No game is fair. That's how games are. They have rules. And here's the bottom line. You cannot break the rules of the game in the middle of the game. That's what Will Smith did. You cannot break the rules of the game. If you break the rules of the game, well, I shouldn't say it's impossible to break the rules, but if you try to break the rules, you're going to have to do it in such a clever way, in such an engaging way that you can bring people with you to question it, to like have a timeout, to check what is it we're doing. You have to do it in a sensitive, clever way. You cannot just abruptly violate the rules of the game. It's considered to be childish. That's what happened. So, again, what we're talking about is energy flow, context, how life works, how astrology works, and how we best function. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying what the energy is and how we can move forward and what Will Smith can do better and what all of us can do better if we ever get into a situation like this in our own lives. So we all need to develop habits. We need to build habits and strategies for how we deal with extremely uncomfortable situations. Because a time will come when the cosmic matrix, the transits, the progressions, everything have lined up. They've aligned in a way that brings things to a breaking point. And in unusual extreme conditions where you're now in a situation that's out of character, even though your life is normally managed very well and is more easily handled, this happens when the transits line up in a certain way, and you need to prepare yourself. What would I do under this situation? I think that part of the fascination with this event is what would you do? What would I do? What would any of us do under a similar circumstance? or a revised circumstance. You might say, well, if my wife was insulted because she had, her hair was shaved off, I would understand. Well, let's make it a little touchier. What if you have a child who has a mental disability and the comedian says, oh, let's put your child in the next Forrest Gump movie? Is that funny? Do you think that's funny? Is that acceptable? Would that cross a line of being off color to being downright mean-spirited? Everybody has a different line. Everybody has a different sensitivity about these things. So the question is, if you're faced with your participation in some game, in some activity, in some club, in some organization, in a business, and the rules of the game allow for certain things that you don't think they should allow for, and all of a sudden it's driving you crazy. I mean, you live with it every day. Life is life, and that's not perfect. And all of a sudden you feel explosive about it. And you find yourself maybe, in this case with the trines that we talked about in the first video in the series, in the 44 vibration, it's just kind of happening. You find yourself getting up and walking up and ready to smack someone. This is where you need to have good habits, clear values, and have thought through a strategy. Because if you don't, and you don't have time to think about it, it's all going on right then, you can act out and break the rules of the game, and then you become the bad guy because you've disrupted everything. You didn't follow the rules. And in a sense, that is correct. You didn't. So that's what happened to Will Smith. He snapped. So, as astrologers, what do we do for our clients? We don't tell them, oh, you have Saturn-Uranus and 11 vibration. No wonder you went wacko. No wonder you flipped out. Well, fortunately that transit only happens every few years. So, that's life. No. As astrologers, we can find solutions. We can find strategies. We can find understanding. Just by understanding the dynamics of what's going on, that's a first step. Next step is, yes, let's develop some strategies. Let's think of scenarios. What could have happened? Well, number one, as I have here, he could have left the event. What if Will and Jada would have gotten up out of their seats and walked out? Whoa. They could have said, I'm not playing this game. Now, that is also not the most clever thing to do, because once you commit to the game, and Will Smith he's a full-blown, loved, and extremely successful actor. He's proud to be there. He's very touched to get the award. He lives in that world. He believes in that world. All of a sudden he wants to change it and doesn't like some of the rules. Maybe, I think number two strategy would be even better. He could have publicly called out the situation. Maybe he could have walked up and instead of slapping Chris Rock, he could have said, can I have the microphone for a second? Chris Rock would probably give it to him. He could maybe even try to joke around a little bit. And then he could try to say something about, I know we're all having fun here, but, having a disease where you lose your hair is really not funny. And we all need to be here to help each other, etc. He could have made it a very touching, moving moment. A learning moment, as we like to say. So you have to think of these things, but if you don't have a strategy, if you don't think through it, if you're not ready for it, you can't think of all these things always at the moment. But if you have some basic rules, remember we're all in games, we're all in clubs, we're all in committees, we're all in businesses, we're all in families, and those, they all have rules. A lot of the rules are unwritten, the rules are not always fair. And if all of a sudden you start having transits like Will Smith had, and that moment you feel like you can't tolerate it anymore, you're not going to take it anymore, you're going to just dish it right back, and you're feeling angry about it, Mars-Uranus is going on, Mars-Saturn-Uranus, and you're getting in this mood, at the moment, believe it or not, it could sound reasonable to you. But there's a better way to handle it. You can do something sudden. You can do something explosive. You can do something radical. but it can be more sensitive, more delicate, and more accepting of the reality that once you accept the rules and you get the benefits of those rules, you don't also get to have temper tantrums about how bad the rules are when you fully endorse them. So that's the strategy. So what I do with clients, and what in vibrational astrology we do very often at the bottom of this slide, find creative solutions. Find creative solutions to the energy that's there. Brainstorm about it. Think about what does this energy want to do. You cannot deny the astrological force. It needs to be fulfilled. Will Smith, I'm trying to remember his name. Will Smith is this Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto getting involved, wanting to change the platform, the rules of the game. Find a way to do it suddenly, explosively, but with refinement and without breaking the rules in such an extreme and violent way. By being violent, you've actually repeated the problem. The problem is you feel like there was aggression. Verbal aggression can be worse than physical aggression. There's been disrespect. Responding to aggression and disrespect with a different form of aggression and disrespect is actually not solving the problem. You've absorbed the problem into yourself and you've reverberated it back out again. It's not very effective. So as human beings, we need to be like transformers, and it's not easy to do, to take that energy in, make some improvement to it, and then send it back. Then we become real heroes, and we have done something really good. So that's the path forward. In a way, Will Smith, as much as we may not want to admit it, reflects something about all of us, all of our struggles when we get gripped by a thing like this and we say something and we wish we could take the words back. So to prevent that, you develop a maturity and a wisdom about how life works. You develop strategies, ideas, concepts for yourself to implement so that you've got that toolkit right there. And being part of the Hollywood world that idolizes violence, all of the car chase scenes, all of the gun shooting, all of the things that are happening, idolizing that and then being able to step out in real life and not idolize it and not enact those stories, it's not going to happen. Whatever you train your mind to believe and endorse goes into your system. So of course it's going to be very difficult for Will Smith to break out of this pattern when he endorses it on a regular basis, including the rap music that he's done. Now, what I'm talking about here is energy flow, what we engage in, what we promote, what we say. It's not a blame game. It's not a judgment game. It's only a judgment about what decisions we make and what the results of them are. And we all make good and bad decisions. So we're just saying, here's a strategy for how to change this, is endorse what you believe in and don't compromise so much in your everyday life and think about the effects of what you're doing. And you could see these thoughts were bubbling up. Will Smith, said life imitates art. He's getting it. It's in his mind. He's got an aspiration there that was not able to fully develop in the highest way. So, our goal as astrologers is to understand energy flow and find ways to direct it in the best way. We can brainstorm with our client about strategies. You don't have to do a reading. This is the way it is, X, Y, Z. You can say, this is the way it is. What can we do? And by understanding the meaning of the energy flow, Saturn-Uranus, find new rules that liberate people. What rules liberate? Which rules hurt? That's the theme. That's what's bothering him that night. So find creative solutions. Don't get into the blame game. Oh, this one's right. This one's bad. This one, just think about what mistakes were made. Life is not a football game where we choose between Will and Chris, or we declare both of them guilty. Maybe you can do that outside of your work as an astrologer. But as an astrologer, you're just focusing on what is the energy flow, What is the motivation? What is the purpose? And how can we make it healthier, more constructive, and more productive? As astrologers, our goal is to find solutions for better living. That's it. That's the beginning. That's the end. Better solutions for the lives we have. So Will Smith did make a big mistake. Just focus on correcting it and moving forward. That's our job. So the Hollywood rules, I mentioned this before, they allow Chris Rock the freedom to make jokes that can hurt people personally. He is not required to research his topics to find out why Will Smith's wife Jada shaved her head. He says he didn't know that she had an autoimmune disease, alopecia, that causes hair loss. Will Smith and Chris Rock have known each other for decades, and Chris Rock knows Jada, but he hasn't taken enough interest to find out why she shaved her head. He doesn't feel any responsibility to research it so that he knows what his jokes are, what effect they're going to have, and what their relevance is, even though he's getting paid all this money. Yes, those are the rules of the game. That's called Hollywood. It's considered to be okay. It's not considered to be irresponsible. So maybe it is irresponsible, maybe it isn't. But if you think it's irresponsible and you want to change those rules, and I think that's what's going on, you might say at an unconscious level for Will Smith, you're going to have to find clever ways to do it. Life doesn't change by having a tantrum and then smacking somebody. So that's what's going on. Those are the rules, whether they're good or not. When we play the game, we obey the rules, and we can work to improve the worlds. But if we fail if we give in to the pressure of Mars, Saturn-Uranus 11 vibe to have a temper tantrum, even if the reason for the temper tantrum is a good one. So it's not the most effective and best way to do things, and it tends to some extent to perpetuate the story that's going on of disrespecting and hurting people and not supporting them to be as free and creative and liberated as they can be. So I mentioned this before, that Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith have an unconventional marriage in which there have been affairs outside of marriage. Will Smith is trying new or progressive rules of the game for marriage. He and his wife are easy targets for Chris Rock, whose jokes often focus on sexuality. I'm sure that Will Smith was concerned that Chris Rock has already gone after Jada twice. He went after her earlier for her not wanting to participate in the awards because of a lack of representation of different ethnic groups, and he poked fun at her for that. He pokes fun at her for having a shaved head. This is all considered to be fine and very light. You as a famous person, as a person that if you're in politics, if you're in anything, people are going to assault you. You have to get used to it. I'm not that famous. I get assaulted on a regular basis verbally. People say the nuttiest, crazy things about me all the time. They also say wonderful things as well. And I'm not even, that famous, but in a small group of astrology, I am. People will, what can we say about politicians? We call them jerks, idiots, whatever. If they weren't in public life, we wouldn't do that. So if you become a representative and popular, that comes with the territory. That's part of the game. That's part of what you've accepted. If you don't want to do that, then go into hiding. A lot of people think, oh, they're rich, they're famous, they have everything. No, you're going to get targeted all the time. And so Will Smith is in a vulnerable situation, a tricky situation, where he's juggling many different things in a very complex world. Issues of commitment, mutual support, respect, honesty, compromise, values in his personal life and professional life. All of this very complicated in the way that he's arranged his marriage, his professional life. For example, Will Smith does rap music. Maybe not as violent lyrics as a lot of rap music. A lot of his acting roles, do they reflect his spiritual aspirations? Do they communicate? Do they inspire people? These are tough questions. Does he have mutual respect and support with his wife? Some people say that we've gone from a patriarchal society to an anti-male society, where the masculine, Jordan Peterson and other people have this philosophy. I don't know. As astrologers, we don't need to get into that. We all have our own opinions. But as astrologers, what you're going to do is just focus on the energy flow in that context and be aware of the complexities that are involved and the social movements and how they can toss people around. Okay, so Hollywood professes nonviolence and kindness and often gives generously to good causes. They have free concerts to help in many needy situations, but simultaneously features music and movies that are filled with glamorized violence and aggression and a range of attitude towards women from the best to the worst. So that's just what is. And, as a consultant, you don't want to get inundated. You don't want to get overwhelmed with cliches and political images. Just focus on your client and the context of what's going on and what will help that client. What will help Will Smith is to have a strategy for dealing with these kinds of situations as they come up again, and to have firmly in his mind that once you buy into the rules of the game, you've bought into them, and you're going to have to change them in clever ways. You have to become, use your intelligence, use your creativity, come up with clever ways and moving ways to improve it. And certainly there are times where the very unrestrained approach of Hollywood becomes, and people like Chris Rock, becomes disrespectful and hurtful. It crosses a line. So, watching that line and pulling things into a healthy energy flow is important. But the way that Will Smith did it, extremely ineffective, and then hurts his aspirations and goals in the long run, because it just makes him look bad, and anything he represents looks bad. So this video shows how evidence-based astrology is based on well-defined rules. These two videos, if you've watched part 1 and this part 2, you see that this vibrational astrology, which is a form of evidence-based astrology, is based on well-defined rules. We see how these rules are applied to analyze the situation. We see how we use data visualization in the form of the astrosignature forecast graph, which enables us to predict future times that are inclined to the same behavior. It also gives us a way to evaluate how the astrosignature works. We consistently provide useful information to people using the principles and concepts and tools of vibrational astrology. The book, The Astrology of Bipolar Disorder, Scientific Breakthrough, which, by the way, right now, if you want to get that book, you can go to astrologydc.com. You'll see a button there that takes you to another website to buy it. It's not on Amazon.com yet as of late March 2022. It should be there by May or so, 2022. And that vibrational astrology is very different from other forms of astrology. And interest in evidence-based astrology in the form of vibrational astrology is growing very fast in academia and in some industries, and at a much slower pace than it is among astrologers. Some people are saying we shouldn't even call vibrational astrology astrology, because it takes an approach of having clear rules and models, evaluating them, testing them, applying them, and using databases, using all kinds of modern research tools, including hypothesis tests for extreme rigor. And vibrational astrology follows the same kind of rules you have in medicine, psychology, and other fields for levels of confidence and ideas and so on. And lastly, to summarize some key points, we use vibrational astrology to discover solutions to improve the lives of people. That's the goal. It's not about, what's good or bad. We look at all the fundamental functions in the astrology as positive. They all have purposes. There are no intentional malefics in the sky. It's up to us to find ways to bring out the healthiest, most productive expressions of those energies. That's it, my friends. I'm sure that's the last slide. Oh no, there is one more. Yeah, one more slide. If you're interested in vibrational astrology, here are some resources. And this is the version of video I'm making for Astrology DC, so you're already aware of these. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.